Hello, Jon Peters here, and welcome to the first video in a series that I'm going to do on co-parenting after divorce. Stay tuned. Welcome to Wellness with Jon. I'm Jon Peters, and these are resources to help you thrive. If you're returning to the channel, thank you so much for watching. And if you're new to the channel, I'm a therapist, mindfulness-based therapist who's been in practice for 27 years now. And I publish videos on this channel about a variety of resources to help you thrive. And in this video, I'm going to kick off a series on co-parenting after divorce. So my goal in this initial video is to explain just how did we get here? Why am I talking to you about this? But also to talk about just the framework for the content that I'm going to include in this series, okay? So to start off with, just background on me and why I'm talking about this. I've been a mindfulness-based therapist for 27 years, mostly in the outpatient setting, but also in the inpatient setting to some degree. And I ended up, right out of grad school, getting a job that was paid for by a grant from the state that was targeted toward separated parents, okay? Now, at the time I graduated from grad school, I had no intention whatsoever in specializing and working with any sort of issue related to divorce. My own parents had been kind of in the process of divorce throughout most of my childhood, but never actually got legally divorced. But it just wasn't really a topic of special interest to me. I had other things that were on my mind, especially becoming a mindfulness-based therapist and doing general cognitive behavioral stuff. But I took this job, okay? And so more than half of my time ended up being spent basically as a therapeutic coach for hostile separated parents, because the main source of our referrals was the court system. Basically, when judges were fed up with cases that kept swirling through the legal system, and they knew that there were psychological issues and social issues at play, they would refer these cases to our program. And so we kind of got the worst of the worst, because it was people who were battling it out incessantly in court about lots of things that weren't really being satisfyingly solved by the legal system. And so it was trial by fire, right? Because we were getting a lot of really hot and complicated cases. But I'll say more about the things that I learned in that role over a 5-year period where I was intensely doing that in that program, because I learned a lot of what I'm going to share in this series back then, although I continued to work with that population after that. So as it happened, I ended up being a therapist, but a therapist who was working a lot with separated parents, and sometimes with families, including a separated parent, and sometimes children of separated parents. But primarily, we were working with parents in that program because we were trying to figure out how can we best support parents to turn adversarial, hostile co-parenting that puts their kids at risk of all sorts of things into more effective co-parenting. That was like the kernel of that program. Now, during that period, because of that role that I was playing in those cases, I ended up becoming interested in civil mediation. So I was a therapist, but I got interested in getting trained, and I got formally trained as a mediator. And at one point, I began doing mediation. And for about a 10-year period, I did divorce mediation. So mediation is different from therapy because it's not aimed at improving the status or functioning of the participants, but it's aimed at getting satisfying, workable, hopefully durable agreements between the parties who are in dispute about one or more things. And so I ended up doing mediation for about a 10-year period, right? Also, because I was working with that population, I ended up getting a gig teaching the state-mandated course that you have to take if you are getting a legal divorce and you have minor children at the time of the divorce, okay? If you get divorced, you may know this if you're in the process or have gone through it before. the state, basically, the judge won't sign your final divorce decree until you get checked off that you've participated in a parenting class related to divorce topics, right? So I taught that in my local area, and over a 15-year period, I taught over 250 live parenting workshops to help parents understand issues related to how to help their kids cope with divorce. And over that time period, I had several thousand parents come through that program, right? So I had an opportunity to, as an educator, to talk with lots and lots of parents in that program. I also ended up becoming kind of an expert witness. In court, there's experts to the case where you're working with the case and you have special knowledge of a case. And then sometimes they pull you in just because you happen to know something about the topic, right? So over the years, I ended up getting involved in the legal system by witnessing in court as an expert witness related to divorce topics. And related to that, I also collaborated with a collaborative law practice. And I'll say more about collaborative law in a video later in this series, but basically a type of divorce law or divorce attorney practice that tries to lower the adversarial posture of the parties with each other so that they get more satisfying outcomes with less legal battles. All right. So I ended up basically working in the niche of divorce for many years. And while today it's not as large an emphasis in my practice, I do continue to work not in all of those roles, but today mostly as a co-parent coach. So what I do today is I coach parents who are in the process of separation or parents who have separated and help them cope with that separation and all of the adjustments that are related to it, as well as co-parenting effectively after the separation. So that's the role I play in this niche today, right? So if you happen to watch these videos and you want to get in touch with me to see about whether or not we could work together, just check links in the description. My website's jonpeters.online. You can hit the contact button and send me a message to inquire about whether my services might be helpful to you, okay? So suffice it to say, over my 27 years in these different roles that I have played, I have worked with thousands and thousands of separating and separated parents. And I have learned a lot from all of those parents that I've worked with and those families that I've worked with. And I think that I have some things to share. In fact, at one point, maybe a decade or so ago, I wrote 2 books on the topic. So I wrote The Quick Guide to Divorce Mediation, just to help parents understand the mediation process if they're involved in it or thinking about it. And I also wrote a book called The Coparenting Manifesto, which is a book about how to not fight after you separate. And a lot of the content actually that I'm going to share in this series is very closely related to the content that I wrote about in that book. So feel free to just watch this series. If you really want to read the book, feel free to buy my book. So that's what I want to talk about in this series on my channel, even though my channel is not primarily devoted to divorce issues. Okay. And if you would like me to address a topic related to divorce, feel free to leave a comment below. Now, I discourage using the comment section below to just flame your ex. That's not the purpose of my channel. But if you say, hey, I'm thinking about this question, or I have a question about such and such, feel free to leave a comment, or you can shoot me a message via my website as well if you want, and I'll try to make a video on the topic that's of interest to you, okay? So what am I doing in this series? I want to accomplish 3 goals in the videos that I'm going to publish in this series on co-parenting after divorce. Number 1, I want to have videos that help you cope with your divorce, because not only do you need to cope just so that you function well and are not too miserable, but how well you help your children cope is dependent in part on how well you are coping with your divorce, right? So I want to help you cope better so that you help your children to cope better. Now, I also do want to give you some advice about things that you can do directly to help your children cope with the divorce. Parents often have questions about what's the ideal parenting time, and things like how do we talk to our kid about the separation and things like that. And so I'm going to give you some advice about things that will directly impact the quality of how you help your child cope with the transitions and adjustments, but also how you can parent effectively in the context of being a separated parent, because I think there's some special issues you really have to pay attention to. And related to both of those is I want to give you some advice about how to co-parent effectively. Because as I said, I've learned so much from all of the parents that I've worked with. And co-parenting after separation is one of the hardest things that we do on the planet ever. And so I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned that I think if you know them, you're going to be set up so much better to feel more confident about how you're proceeding rather than reactive. And you're going to have some specific strategies in your mind that you and your ex can employ to stabilize and improve your co-parenting relationship, right? Now, I know some of you right now may be thinking, no way, it doesn't matter what I do because my ex is crazy or evil or stupid or all three. But the reality is you have some things that are under your control. You're not under control of everything you might want to be under control of, including your ex. But there are things that matter that if you do them one way versus another, you're going to lead down different paths. And I want to try to help you see the clearest, best path and equip you with some strategies so you can take positive, firm, confident steps down that path, right? So join me in this series. I'm going to be publishing quite a few videos on this topic because I have a lot to say. And I said it in my book, but I'm going to say even more than I say in my book because I've even learned more in the last decade than when I published it. So join me in this series, and I look forward to sharing what I've learned because I have shared it with lots of parents, and I have seen the positive changes that can happen when you get some clarity about how to make those changes, right? So thanks for joining me in this video, and just check the playlist. I'm going to publish all of these videos on this topic in one playlist on the topic of co-parenting after divorce. So just follow along. After you've watched this first one, now you have your bearings, and I'm going to now focus on a variety of specific topics in all of the subsequent videos in this series, right? So I'll see you in the next one.